sleepless nights, coffee houses, clubs, and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, I still see your face. Buses roll, distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Light on as I drive on, singing our song. The light on as I drive on, singing our song. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
So that's Tulsi Gabbard, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. Hopefully you don't have any problems here. Glitching a little bit. I don't know why. Glitching a little bit. All right. So, had to refresh constantly. So if I disappear for a second and I pop back in, that's what's going on. But don't worry. I'm going to do I'm going to do a vanishing act and come back. All right, you know how the deal is here, folks. Follow Robert Barnes. Join us very soon at vbarneslaw.locals.com. You can, of course, check out sports betting. It's political picks over there as well. And I'm at peoplespundit.locals.com. Look, my gut is telling me that was a significant moment, and it's one that may be hindered somewhat because we are not done watching this evolution of the Republican Party yet. And somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard and her followers, don't have a place at this moment that they could, immediately knee-jerk say, I'm leaving the Democratic Party. I guess I'm a Republican. The bottom line is Tulsi Gabbard for two reasons. One is she doesn't really believe in small government when it comes to any of that, although there's definitely populist strains. But the anti-war component is the big deal here. It has changed parties time and time again. Originally, Republicans were the anti-war party. And then the Vietnam era came, fair, for better, for worse, fair or not. Richard Nixon was charged. It fell to him to end the Vietnam War. And the Democrats who started that war got to pretend like they were no longer in favor of conflict and that they were the party of peace and anti-war, and et cetera, et cetera. All right. Tulsi said wokeism and warmongering is the reason why she left the Democratic Party. Right now, there's at the very least a bunch of leaders in the Republican Party who are at the very least afraid of wokeism and won't fight against it. And then you have, of course, the warmongering. They have done largely nothing to stop this escalation in Ukraine, which is getting more and more dangerous by the day. All right. For those who called this, called these events, saw what was transpiring, and knew how this would all shake out, regardless of Western media propaganda, these same people will tell you that we are currently the closest we've been to a nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis about 6 decades ago. All right. Let me make sure I've got everything here. If not, I can just upload it. But we're going to look at the crosstabs anyway. There's a couple of things I want to go over. Arizona, perfect example. You have what looks to be a gubernatorial candidate who is new right and is, without a doubt, consolidating the Republican Party behind her. All right. But it's a great example of what I'm talking about, that this fight is not over yet within the Republican Party. There are neocons and neoliberals who pretended to be fans of Ronald Reagan. Of course, they were not fans of Ronald Reagan. If they were old enough to have been around during Ronald Reagan, they hated Ronald Reagan's guts. And as Bill O'Reilly rightly pointed out in a screaming match with George Will several years back when Donald Trump was running for president originally, these are people that later would ride on Reagan's coattails. Historically, they couldn't stand Ronald Reagan. They thought what is now considered mainstream Republican economic theory, right, which is supply side economics, they thought that was voodoo economics, as George Herbert Walker Bush called it. They thought it was a joke, his foreign policy. They thought he was dangerous. He could lead to World War III, a nuclear strike, yada, 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 yada. They transformed themselves thanks to a little outlet called Fox News in the 1990s, and they became, under George W. Bush, they got a foothold in establishment Republican Party politics and the foreign policy, the intelligentsia, if you want to call it that. So when those people still there, still pretending to be Republicans, still impacting the votes of members of Congress, there really is no place for Tulsi Gabbard to say, I'm leaving the Democratic Party, and guess where I'm going? Oh, that's right. I'm not going to the Republican Party just yet, because they haven't done anything to stop the escalation in Eastern Europe. They have done nothing but send more money to Ukraine. So it's not like they are a natural home for the Tulsi Gabbards of the world. All right. So with that in mind, let's bring in Robert. I'm curious to get his thoughts on it. And then I'm going to try to adjust my light a little bit. All right, Robert, I was playing Tulsi Gabbard. Of course, welcome tonight, as always. Welcome, my friend. Sportspicks.locals.com. That's what I was trying to say. All right. Look, Robert, This is the thing. My gut tells me that this announcement by Tulsi, and people are like, "Well, dude, she only was polling at like 5% in the Democratic primary. 5% attached to the Republican base is a pretty damn nice chunk." All right. I mean, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Elections are won on margins, and you put together coalitions, and that's how you cobble together what's called a majority, and you win 50+1. Like 5% would be huge right now for the Republican Party. But Robert, it's like this may be the start of it, and that's what my gut tells me. But as of right now, because of all the rhinos and the wannabes, the fake Reaganites, there's no natural home for her yet. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it shows is that the anti-war constituency within the Democratic Party doesn't have any place to go within the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I would compare it to when Bob Casey Sr. was looking at leaving the Democratic Party over the issue of abortion. That was a sign that there was no longer a place for a pro-life Democrat in the Democratic Party. And now there's John Bell Edwards in Louisiana. There's one or two that are kind of pro-life, but that's it. And so the fact that the Democratic Party of the early 1970s that was built, fueled by the anti-war movement, now no longer, someone feels that they no longer have a voice within it, that the party no longer represents them, is an extraordinary departure of democratic norm and orthodoxy, in the sense that this was someone who was a number 3 in the Democratic National Committee at one point, was considered a rising star, military background, woman, Hawaii, but anti-war, etc. And now she's in a position where she feels the need to publicly disassociate herself from the Democratic Party. Was a presidential candidate, and the experience of going through that is what told her the Democratic Party is no longer a place for sensible voices on issues of war, on issues of wokeism, on issues of censorship by big tech. Some of these sort of seminal issues that were part of the core of the anti-war, free speech-oriented dissident left, there's no longer a place there. There's people like Alan Dershowitz pretending the Democratic Party still welcomes them when they hate him.
I hate his guts.
But I think, and her timing was meant to be a reminder to people that, there just isn't any hope in the Democratic Party. And I think this was compounded by the latest Ukraine vote, that once again, not a single Democrat in the House or the Senate voted against more money for Ukraine. At a time when it makes even less and less and less practical sense, and poor timing right on the eve of the election to be sending more money to foreigners. But I think it was just, it revealed, Glenn Greenwald's been saying this now for a little while, but it's, if you're Aaron Mate, if you're Jimmy Dore, if you're Glenn Greenwald, if you're Tulsi Gabbard, the kind of anti-war left she represented, there's no place in the Democratic Party for you.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's become the Hillary, Obama, neocon, neoliberal, Victoria Nuland alliance, the sort of beastly alliance between the Bushes and the Cheneys of the world. I mean, the fact that Liz Cheney is a hero to many Democrats is, it's so ridiculous. This guy was Darth Vader, her father, just a few years ago. But it shows you how far the Democratic Party's fallen. They've been captured by a professional class elite that is a warmongering community and constituency. And what it affords, if Republicans are smart and savvy, is the chance to seize the opportunity, much as they did after World War I. Woodrow Wilson dragged the Democratic Party into the war, and that gave a massive anti-war boost to the Republican Party in populous parts of the country, the Midwest and the West especially. And it led to the biggest Republican dominance that's arguably ever happened, was the Republican dominance politically of the 1920s. Reagan never got a Republican Congress. W only held on to it for a few years, blew it very quickly. Nixon never had a Republican Congress. So, the last time there was real Republican dominance top to bottom across the ballot was the 1920s. And the South would have naturally aligned with Republican causes, but for the fact they didn't let a lot of people vote. So that would vote Republican. You weren't allowed to in the South. Not just black voters were excluded. Many poor whites were excluded. Just look up, how did Mississippi have fewer voters in the 1900s than they did in 1860, right? It wasn't like there's a bunch of slaves voting in 1860. It's because half of the poor whites were, or more, were disqualified in the ballot until the 1960s. People still haven't put that together yet in parts of the Deep South. So aside from the anomaly Deep South, you're talking about the country was like 2-1 Republican, the rest of the country. And so hopefully they'll seize the opportunity. I mean, we'll see. I mean, the anti-deep state Senate candidates like Blake Masters and J.D. Vance, they try to starve them of money and try to weaken them, but I don't think will ultimately succeed. And the fact that Tulsi Gabbard has to exit the Democratic Party is a sign of how far the Democratic Party has fallen on issues that used to be core to their constituency.
Let's talk about that, and we'll get into those Senate races. Hopefully it doesn't screw up, but I got a couple clips that I want to get into to talk about it, because I think I'm seeing something at a whole new level. You know, Robert, you and I watched 2016 and we were like, they got to be doing this on purpose. Then by 2018, we're like, this is definitely on purpose. By 2020, we openly mocked it. And now here we are in 2022. And they tried to play a little fake for a while there. Didn't they, Robert? 12 months ago, they were trying to like fake it a little bit and make it look like they were trying to be legit, or not legitimate, credible. And then this way, when they pivoted to their bull, watch my language, but when they pivoted back to their BS, then everyone would kind of think they're credible about it. Again, I told people, don't believe Quinnipiac right now. Don't fall for it right now. And they're going to pivot and they're going to spew the same old crap. You watch. And that's what they're doing now in a lot of these places, which we're going to mock openly in a little bit again. But look at speaking of how far some of these people have fallen. One of the most predictable things, you don't have to be the people's pundit. You don't have to be a betting genius to know how these people are going to react. And immediately, she's an agent of Vladimir Putin. She's a Russian agent. She's Putin's puppet. This stuff, Robert, is like, you talk about the big lie. Hillary Clinton was one of the first to accuse her of that nonsense because she didn't buy into the Russian collusion lie, which is a lie. All right. For those of you who are still deluded under the illusory truth effect, you don't know, take the serum, wake up. All right. That was a lie. Anytime Glenn Greenwald, anytime Matt Taibbi, anytime Tim Pool, anytime Dave Rubin, anytime a leftist steps out and says, this is bullcrap, I'm not going to just hive mind this. This is nuts and it's not true. You're a Russian agent. And it was so verified Twitter today. It was so predictable. You didn't have to be us to predict that they were going to go this route. And it's like, at some point, that has to wear real thin on people. It has to. There's talk about, I'm not going to get into, the big lies and stuff. There has never been evidence of any of these people, any of them, ever taking a dime from Russia, ever push. If you have, look at what they did to Elon Musk. We talked about this a little bit last week, but this is what I'm talking about. You can't step an inch out of this, out of their circle in this conversation. And this is what really pushed Tulsi Gabbard away. Russia collusion started this push. She's big government with a lot of other things, but she was military and she understands the power of the administrative state. She understands the power of the police state, the military state. And that was something she just never could get on board with. What do Republicans have to do, because I know a lot of people are turned off by that crap. Even in 2018, at the height of Russia collusion, we were polling these states. And a lot of these states, most people said, this is a political witch hunt, in the battleground states, at least. Even they knew that, although it definitely impacted some votes. You would be nuts to say it didn't. But what does the Republican Party have to do here, Robert? They got to get rid of the Lindsey Grahams, who take to Twitter and threaten Elon Musk. Did you see that, a couple days ago, basically last week, but a few days ago, threatening to take away his tax credit for electrical cars. And by the way, folks, he didn't offer taking away that tax credit and then, saving it, not spending that money. So lessening your tax burden indirectly. No, he proposed giving it to Ukraine. This is, not going to fly, man. I mean, those voters are not going to move over to the Republican Party. Maybe they will candidate by candidate, like a Blake Masters. I could see them voting for, or a J.D. Vance. I could see them voting for. But in mass, they're not going to vote Republican down ballot. Not yet. What does the Republican Party have to do to get that?
It just needs to have more anti-war voices, anti-deep state voices, more populist voices, to have a dominant role.
Bigger
And
voices.
the pro-war voices need to be the minority. There'll always be pro-war voices as long as the deep state has institutional influence, but they should not be the ones in position. They should not be the ones Fox is promoting. They should not be the ones with prime positions on committees. They should not be the ones with prominent social media dominance of the Republican Party messaging. That's what's got to change. You need more the Rand Paul wing, the J.D. Vance, the Blake Masters, that kind of wing in the Senate, MTG, Paul Gosar, Thomas Massey, that sort of wing in the House needs to be the more public face of the Republican Party. And, at some point, maybe they'll wake up. I mean, because, you no longer need your speaker or Senate majority leader to raise money for you. It's not, nor do you need them to get access to the court of public opinion. You can directly raise funds. You can squeeze an outsider challenger and, cut off some of his funds. Watch, it won't work. J.D. Vance will still win. Blake Masters will still win. So
let's look at that. Go ahead. Finish your thought, though. And
that's about it. So I think Tulsi Gabbard is a sign of, right now, it's rejection of the Democratic Party, not yet acceptance of the Republican Party. And that's on Republican Party leaders to change.
So last time we polled Arizona, we had Masters down by, under 4. Largely came from, there was a bitter primary going on. And curiously getting into this, and I always text you when I see what I see. And getting into the survey, the biggest question for me was, number one, is Lake ahead, and by how much? I suspected she was. And then really, was he behind in, remember the Baris poll for NPR? It showed Lake up by one or two, but Masters down by 8. That was insane to me. And it just reeked of Baris they wouldn't know how to do it even if they did, but they don't wait for education. It's grossly postgraduate. We're still allowing people to interview in Arizona right now. We may even conduct an exit poll there, it looks like. But I'm seeing tightening. And I saw this poll, which was conducted October 3rd through the 4th. All right. And it was this idea that Mark Victor was surging. Robert never got Victor above 2% in the poll.
Kelly, you mean Kelly?
No, Victor.
Gotcha.
Kelly was at 45 or 46 in this poll. Blake Masters was at 33, and Victor was at 20 almost. And it's insane to me, because as a pollster, you got to know you screwed up and that you did something. Sometimes, guys, there's just noise, and a pollster sometimes has to eat it and just say, this is a bad poll, I'm throwing it out. It's just garbage. We're expected to believe that this man surged after this, and I hope that it doesn't skip on me. I don't think it is for the audience, but on my end, I'm not able to see it. So it's about 30 seconds. Listen to this guy.
We are a constitutional republic, not an unrestricted democracy. Today, everything is up for a vote. Very little should be up for a vote. Like, for example, who should represent the good people of the state of Arizona? That should be up for a vote. What should the age of consent be? This is something that reasonable minds disagree on. That should be up for a vote.
Is it skipping on you guys, or no? Did you hear that?
No,
clip
I saw it. I mean, he got into the debate, etc. I don't see it more than single digits. I mean, those third-party candidates fade out outside of really rare exceptions. And I just don't see him being a fact. And, especially telling people there should be fewer, you should be allowed to vote on less things, except maybe whether we should allow 14-year-olds to bang their teacher. I mean,
I'll tell you.
I don't think so.
I mean, Robert, this is a little bit insane to me. First, and like I said, and I'll pull it up in a little bit. I'll show everybody. He's still at 1.8, 2.1. That's all he's got. It slid actually a little bit in our interviews since the debate, and I imagine that's because the only ones after that answer who are still voting for him are younger Democrats who don't like Mark Kelly, or maybe some people who just, can't bring themselves to vote Republican, but they don't like Mark Kelly. So look, even if that poll is right about Mark Kelly's support, it's still good news for Blake Masters. Victor's not getting 20% of the vote, and Mark Kelly is in the mid-40s. Interestingly, that's where we found him. Here it is, the U.S. Senate. We got him at 45.8 to Masters 45.2. This was right before the debate. I want to actually bring up the exit polls because I did something here. You guys can see my education, who's certain to vote. Robert, look at extremely enthusiastic. It's Masters 52 to 46. Certain to vote, it's Masters 47.6 to 46.5. All right, and we were talking about his college share going up, right? And let's pull up the crosstabs. I wanted to bring up something you and I have been saying for a while, but people don't listen to, which is that this idea that these people from California and other states are coming to Arizona and Nevada and all in Texas, and they're bringing their politics with them. And the truth is, since 2010, that's not been the case. And the Senate is a great example. So here is the Senate, and I'll make it bigger so everybody can see it. Just bear with me. Looking by place of birth, okay, which makes it much smaller. Let me zoom in. All right, now good. That gives me my little magnifying glass. All right, so born in Arizona is actually Kelly, 49, Masters, 39. U.S., I was born in the U.S., but I was not born in the state of Arizona, which, by the way, is the biggest group at this point in the state of Arizona. They're being generationally changed, you know. That actually goes to Masters, 49, 44. And then outside the U.S. is even. So if you look at this by the governor's race, same thing, only Kari Lake is leading native Arizonans, you know, 46, 45. It's still very close. Not born in Arizona, but born in the U.S. She's leading 50, 45. Outside the U.S., she's leading 47, 43. Listen, I was told firsthand by typical Democrats they're activists. They're not like loyal to the Democratic Party, but they've been voting Democratic. And Hobbs not showing up for that forum, what was it, like 2 weeks ago, burned their ass real bad. It really chapped their ass. They had things they wanted to talk about, from healthcare to rent, not being able to pay their rent, and she was a no-show. And so, you know, they turn it on and they see maybe Kari Lake doesn't give them exactly the answer they want to hear, but at least she showed the hell up and was there to talk about health insurance premiums, which really actually isn't the problem, according to the one who got a question. It was deductibles. All right, so, you know, she was honest. Look, a lot of this Obama did. He did it at the federal level. So while I want your vote, you really need to vote Republican down ballot as well, which we are seeing. A lot of people gave me crap over what we found in Nevada. I'm telling you, Kari Lake could carry the Hispanic vote in Arizona. I'm telling you, this could happen. And it's because of the difference in working class, who's turning out, who's not, no college. Kari Lake is winning some or less, or no college, right? 53 to 39.5. 4-year advanced, Hobbs is only winning by 10. You know that is not enough. In the Senate race, Masters is leading 49-40, which I think he'll widen out when they decide. And then there's a 13-point margin. It's not that much more than Hobbs's margin. But this is a very winnable race for Blake Masters, and throwing polls out like that at this point. And then, interestingly, let me look. I'll give you the title. Something really smells to me here, Robert, because Newsweek, after that came out, Newsweek runs an article, GOP's chances at midterm victory threatened by a dark horse Senate candidate. And what they're trying to do is push this idea that the guy that I just ran a clip of, who's talking about the age of consent, right, being up for debate. Right. So this is the guy they're trying to push. So something really smells to me, man, like this is absolutely coordinated and totally bull. Totally bull. And I think these tactics are going to get worse, man. And it's sad.
I'm sure they will. The bottom line is the fundamentals favor Masters. So, I mean, Masters is always going to be further. He's running against an incumbent. Kari Lake is not.
That's
his
right.
primary was also divisive. So you combine those two, he was not going to have early money. So for that reason, people weren't going to quite know what they were going to do with him. The key number to look was Kelly consistently getting over 50%, and even in the media's polls, he wasn't. And even though he's a relatively new incumbent, still is an incumbent who faced no contested primary, and all you saw was a delayed reaction of a rallying effect. And he looked at the undecided voters as you've been finding in all the places, the undecided voters are anti-democratic voters. They're voters, a voting group that is not going to break for the incumbent. And so that's where Masters did very well in the debate. And you look at all those factors, and then Arizona is a state. I mean, Arizona state that's been 4 to 5 points more Republican than the national average, going on multiple cycles now.
Yes.
And it shifted who was shifting which way in Arizona. You had, some suburban Maricopa trending towards suburban Phoenix, trending towards Democrats, but then you had a whole bunch of Mexican American voters trending Republican. So that net effect, you look at the party registration data, you look at the party affiliation data, you look at the recent election data, you look at the national electorate, all of it forecast Masters winning. In my view, there's about, I would put a 75% chance that Blake Masters wins the Senate seat in Arizona.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm looking at, and just to look at undecideds right now, let's just give you by, let me look at.
I mean, the biggest one is,
forget
do
about
they approve
party.
or disapprove of Joe Biden?
Yeah, they're still. I was just going to say, let's look at voting by voting method. Blah blah blah. Okay, so I guess let me do it this way because I don't know why I didn't put the other one, the reverse. So the column being the Senate, because it's just better like that. But if you look at if you look at by college degree, Robert, high school or less is 12% still undecided. Some college or an associate, which has become this huge group for Republicans. I think what happened here is that under Trump, some of these people went and got like an associate's degree or went to college, but then pulled out, went back into the labor force because the labor market was booming. So they decided, I'm just going to go back and I'm just going to go work again. But some of them are no longer still high school or less or pre, or some kind of voc school or something, so they moved up on that tier a little bit, but they didn't go to 4 years or above. I think that's what's happening here because there's such a big group. 7%, and by the way, that's Arizona's 60% non-college degree, folks. For these pollsters out there who have like 30% post-grad, that is not going to happen. Go look at any exit poll in the last, Robert, 4 election cycles in the state of Arizona. It's actually getting more educated, but it's still not 40% or more college educated. It's like 38, 39%. That's it. So when you have education has a huge impact on the overall result of the poll. Advanced degrees, they're obviously the smallest group. They're about 14.5%. Actually, I think I even have them a little bit high here, maybe 16%. They're 4% undecided. That's it. 4-year degrees are 6% undecided. So, some college and associates 7%, but 7% of 30 is a lot more than 6% of 20. You know what I'm saying? So it's like whatever's left over there. You have to think it's going to go to you have to think that's going to Masters. No reason to believe otherwise.
Yeah, they're working middle class independents who don't pay a lot of attention to elections until they actually vote. That's right. That's who they are. And you look at their core dynamics. That's where you look at the national electorate environment. Incumbency I still think is inconsequential based on what happened in recent election cycles. Number one, it doesn't carry the weight it used to carry. It will help give you a lead early in polls, and that doesn't translate to election day. And I think money matters a lot less than people think it does. And so those two factors that are still being calculated in a lot of analysis out there, whether it's Decision Desk or the Cook Political Report or 538 or Crystal Ball or any of these other people, even 538 in the past has recognized that incumbency is a dwindling factor, but they're pretending it's going to matter this cycle, like they did in 2018 for the Democratic Senate candidates. And people forget, they were saying that Hawley was going to lose in Missouri, that Democrats were going to hold on in Indiana. They didn't break late on North Dakota until the very eve of the election.
That's right.
So in terms of their
Bill
analysis.
Nelson was a shoo-in. Shoo-in.
Well, according to Decision Desk, Florida might be close. According to Decision Desk's latest analysis, they're not sure yet. They say it only leans Republican. So this is
getting insane. It's
completely
insane. And I got to read the Ohio thing. Are you ready? What they wrote? I got it. Here we go. Tim Ryan, D, continues to overperform in polls out of Ohio's U.S. Senate race. The race moved into the toss-up category since last week. And J.D. Vance now has less than a 60% chance of winning in November. Find out more here. And all it does is click on their stupid little graphic. There is no model here, Robert. I'm going to say this until I'm 100 if I live that long, calling on elections. They're not modeling jack shit. They're poll reading, and they're doing it poorly. The polls in Ohio have not been correct in at least 3 election cycles. The poll that they're referring to hasn't called Ohio right since 2012. 2012, the poll that they're referring to, that they're hinging so much on, they had Richard Cordray winning by 7. He got stomped by Mike DeWine. By the way, Mike DeWine didn't even lead, never led in the polls in 2018, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget about this. Richard Cordray was down in one Maris poll in July by about 3 or something like that. And then they herded anyway to Richard Cordray plus 5 or 7 or something like that. Outside the sampling era, Donald Trump was down in Ohio. If it wasn't for me, Trafalgar, and I think there was one other poll that may have had Trump up, but it was by one or 3 points.
I mean,
this is a joke, Robert.
Exactly. The Democratic Party knows this because, like in 2016, the polls were still predicting Hillary was going to win Ohio, but Hillary wasn't going to Ohio, and Hillary wasn't spending any money in Ohio.
Yeah,
it meant their internal polling knew this is entirely bogus, and yet they haven't fixed any of it. It's the same bad, bogus polls that so problematic piece of analysis. Part 1 is still believing incumbency really has weight when recent elections have cast major doubt about that. Suggesting money disparity,
especially in the Senate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And money disparity in statewide elections. They're saying that has a major effect. We've seen it not have major effect now in multiple cycles. And third, that they're ignoring the part of the polling error rate in these states, that they've been awful in a bunch of these states. And so the only state that has overstated any Republican support has been Nevada. Every other in the last several cycles, it's because they're not getting Asian American voters and trying to figure out what.
Not in 2020 though. Not in 2020 though. Actually, they started to blow Nevada in 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because they said it was a much bigger lead than it actually was by the end. And that's because they inflated the college age portion of it, is how they were adjusting to Nevada. But you start with what I did in 2018. I bet on Republicans holding the Senate, adding Senate seats despite the Democratic environment, was because where the contested elections were states that had the Democratic national environment needed to be by double digits, like CNN claimed it was, not single digits like it actually was. And so that's why North Dakota rest. And then you look at Florida. Florida's been close and competitive, for a while. But you look at Arizona, it's a lean Republican state. And so if you have a Republican national environment, the Republican is going to win a statewide seat, as long as they are just anywhere competent or capable, and Blake Masters is more than both. So the J.D. Vance did well in his debate yesterday. Blake Masters did well in his debate a few days before that. They're both going to win, and they're not going to. The polling particularly in these states has been notoriously bad. Ohio's been the worst, probably the worst poll state
Wisconsin
over the last
Ohio
3 cycles.
Wisconsin, I mean, they're all bit. Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. But Ohio is constantly, they were off by 8 to 10 points. I mean, so it's like a huge. Oh, by the way, Decision Desk says North Carolina is also a toss-up. Says Ohio is a toss-up. North Carolina is a toss-up.
You know what's bullcrap about that? A couple weeks ago, I mean, just in casual conversation, they were, one of their main guys over there, just like, they were like, nah, that's not competitive. We don't view that as competitive. I mean, we got to put it as a competitive state, but it's Ted Budd by 5. That's what they said. So understand. I'm trying to explain to people who are watching. They're just full of crap, and I love them, and I work with them for data to get that, but this is getting ridiculous now because it's becoming this echo chamber, and they're talking to themselves. They don't know the public. They're not. If it was a model, Robert, let me just put it this way. If it was a model, it would be factoring in how badly the polls have been, and it would be factoring in how, whether or not those polls have been outside the sampling errors that, or not even, what's the average error been in the last 3 cycles? Is that race within the average error? Because all the other fundamentals
of these states, I mean, what has Ohio been? Like a 10, 12%, 12-point Republican lean? I mean, it's, the national 2020, Biden wins by 4.
12 points.
Trump won by what, 8? 9 in Ohio?
Yep.
It was 12 these states, it was like when they were trying to tell me Hawley was going to lose in Missouri. I was like, no. These in the Trump era, which defines the national current electoral environment in these states for congressional elections, especially, but I think it will start to translate more to gubernatorial races as well. I just don't see it. I think J.D. Vance will be an early call on election night, easy win. It will shock a lot of the insiders that thought that by trying to short him of cash and he and Masters, they could prevent populists from getting in the Senate because Mitch McConnell cares more about keeping populists out than having Republicans have the majority. It's not going to work, and I don't think it's going to prevail in a bunch of these states. I mean, like my other favorite decision desk prediction that they put up in their little YouTube video was that Herschel Walker has no chance. Warnock.
Yeah, that race is over now.
It's all over. Warnock.
That race, it's over.
Warnock's going to win. He's going to run over the election and like it was his ex-wife.
This is why I'm saying I just don't take any of them seriously anymore. And you have to keep your eye on the ball. I'm at the point now, it's like October 11th. So I'm at the point now where it honestly makes it annoys me a little bit. I have to be honest. It annoys me. Like, for people out there who follow me and stuff, don't send me their forecasts. Don't send me their forecasts and ask me to comment on it. I do the shows and we talk about it, and that's it. Definitely don't send me polling. Oh, look at this poll because you don't like the result. I am intentionally trying to ignore them. I learned my lesson in 2016. It was a shock to me that I was right in some of these states, in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, and Florida. Florida, I knew I had. That's my state, so I knew it. Same thing with 18 and 20, so I really didn't have any problem going against the grain. But the rest of the areas, if you focus on them, they can start to make you think you're crazy. So you have to just totally ignore them and do your job. And that's what I did in Wisconsin. By the way, now everybody, I really think we bullied them into telling the truth in Wisconsin. I really believe that. I know for a fact that a certain gold standard university knew we were in the field the same day. I made comments about them on the show. I said, if we have a very seriously different result, I'm going to abuse them. You have to intimidate them into telling the truth, not doing the wrong thing. You have to intimidate them into not playing the game. And this is really sad, which brings me to my next question. We're talking about all these states that have been polled horribly. You think Oz is in the lead? And that these people nobody wants to be the first, because I know this is how they think. I know how they think. I speak to these people. Nobody wants to be the first to put Oz in the lead. Nobody wants. So it's just safer.
That's another one. They have almost a 3-to-1 odds in favor of Uncle Festerman.
Yep.
It's like, for all limitations of Oz, it's another situation where you had an existing Democratic elected official who did not have a very contested primary, running against someone who had a viciously contested primary. And it made some mistakes, frankly, with the base. It was going to take a while for the rally to happen. And your undecided vote, that 7 to 8% of the vote that can swing, you look at their demographics, you look at the issues that matter to them, you look at the ideas they have, they were not going to vote for Uncle Festerman. It's just not going to happen. Oz is going to win in Pennsylvania. I would say at least 2-to-1 odd that Oz
Robert,
wins.
That's the thing. So let's look at what they say is in their model, because you read their newsletter, so do I. Fundraising. If that was really true, if it was nothing but them being poll watchers, okay, then Pennsylvania would lean Republican right now, because here's the freaking numbers, ladies and gentlemen. 14.3 to 11.5, 11.6, let's round up. So from September and in October, the Republicans are still going to outspend them now, because Democrats, they can raise. But everybody saw that. Maybe they won't put it in their analysis, but everybody saw the Fetterman email, the campaign, the internal memo that was leaked to everybody. It went around. It was them in a complete and total panic. This was weeks ago. We're down. We had a 6-point lead a month ago. It's vanished. It's neck and neck. One day Oz is up. The next day we're up by like 1. And we don't have the money to keep going. And if Oz keeps spending like this, we are going to lose. Where is that in their analysis? So fundraising is supposed to be a big deal for them. Again, voter registration trends, they only care to talk about that after they think they see one that's pro-Dem after the Dobbs decision. They ignored it, flatly ignored the entire trend.
Because Pennsylvania's trended Republican, Florida's trended Republican, Arizona's trended Republican, Nevada's trending Republican.
Yep.
You look at actual conduct, party primary participation rate, party self-described affiliation in Gallup's polling data, the party voter registration trends, who's most motivated to vote according to themselves and by independent confirmation of other things they've actually done. And you look at who the undecideds are. All of it says it's going to be a Republican sweep. So, you know, Patrick Basham, the pollster for Democratic Policy Institute, polls for the UK Express or publishes it there. You know, one of the few people along with you that was right in 2016. He put out his predictions based on their recent polling, and they have Republicans taking about 245 to 250 House seats, and they have the Republicans getting 53 or more Senate seats. So that's
Robert,
what their data shows. Say again?
Rhode Island too?
Oh, yeah. You look at Rhode Island
too?
The Republican is leading in Rhode Island.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
by
he's
8
up by
points
6.
or something like that. Six. I mean, the last time
that's not a
Republican
surprise.
was
Look at
held
Rhode
that
Island.
seat was when?
Oh, yeah, it's been way back. But you know what that is? That's like is why I bet on Trump in the 2016 primaries in the Northeast. It's amazing how much it's completely shifted. It's predicted by Kevin Phillips all the way back in emerging Republican majority. But you would see a complete flip. The old Republican Northeastern voter was a Yankee WASP Protestant elite kind of guy, silk stocking kind of guy, Wall Street, Boston,
WASP,
Beacon Hill, etc. The Democratic base were your Catholic ethnics, your Italians, your Irish, your Poles, etc. In the Northeast, that has flipped. Now it's the old elite voter, all votes Democrat. The Yankees, the Anglo-Saxon, self-described English ancestry, etc. Like as I say, a real American does not say English in response to the census. They say American.
That's right.
And that's the number
they
one
say American.
leading. Exactly. You look at Rhode Island, what's happening is working class ethnics. I mean, I was up there for the Alex Jones show trial. That's a disgrace. But in every little place, in every industrial town, it's been wiped out. That there's nothing there. It's just pure despair. And so if you have enough of that vote in any of these communities, you're going to see massive swing because the Democratic Party has completely failed its working class base. I mean, Biden did the student loan thing and then did his kind of quasi-fake marijuana pardon. There was nobody in prison that he actually pardoned, but okay. Why? Because why is he doing that? If Democrats are in such great shape, why is he trying to do crazy things on student loans he doesn't have legal power to do, pardoning people who don't exist in the sense of in prison? It's on pot. It's because they're young. They know the young people aren't turning out. They know the young working class part of their base is not turning out. So it's like, hey, we'll give you student loan forgiveness. Hey, we'll, all your buddies that had pot, don't worry, they'll never go to jail again. You know, they're trying to because they're desperate to get those votes out. And I think it will not surprise me. Like when I was looking at the map of competitive seats, like I think every single toss-up that Decision Desk has listed will go Republican. I mean, and it's because a lot of them are disproportionate. Unlike 2018. Where a lot of the competitive seats
vote, it could be a wipeout, Robert. If the working class votes, it could be a wipeout. Did you see his lead in Rhode Island too with independents? 52 points. I've never even seen a lead like that before. And by the way, that's not the only poll. That is nothing. It's not only one poll in New York. This is what I'm saying, Robert. So we're supposed to believe that because Trafalgar is not the only one who has New York close. All right. It's, just true. For Spectrum News, Siena, which is not a good pollster, they polled for the New York Times with Nate Cohen, and they blew every goddamn battleground state, every single one, favoring Dems by ridiculous points, a ridiculous Democrat bias that never came to fruition. They have in those district level polling that they conducted, they had Lee Zeldin winning in every single battleground area. Not even battleground. It's more like just competitive. Was it a Biden plus like 10 or below or 12 or below area? And Zeldin is ahead in every single one of them. As long as those people come out, it can be a total wipeout. While you were talking about them before and how they were, their history, I was going through Virginia forecasts and New Jersey forecasts. In the end, what did Pat Citarelli lose by? 3 points? 3.5 points?
I mean,
They had like a 90% chance that Murphy would be reelected, 90+%. And that almost didn't happen. The closest forecast, which was for Youngkin, that I found actually came from the Harvard Political Review, but it only gave Youngkin a 52% chance of winning. Even though I went over all the historical data with everybody about elections in Virginia and whether or not the president won that state before. Did his party win that state before? Okay, who controls Congress? There's a pattern in the state of Virginia. We went over it. Even if it was a half a point to 10 points, the pattern still held, and that party had a very difficult time holding on. Barack Obama won it in 2008. He was a first-term incumbent, midterm, and Bob McDonnell stomped the floor with the Democrat. Yet, they couldn't hold it. After there's terms, you only get one term in the state of Virginia. So, this is very clear 45, 50-year voting behavior in a state, and we're supposed to just ignore what is the equivalent of this. They still have Tony Evers favored to win this race, even though every single poll, starting with ours, have Tim Michaels ahead. So again, I want people to understand that it's their poll reading, but they're poll reading what they want. They're not even doing it well. They're not even paying attention to the polls that have a better track record. They're taking everything in the totality without recognizing that these polls have been abysmal. You're really going to make a big deal over the Suffolk poll when they had Biden winning that state by 7 points. So that's why you're moving Ohio back to a toss-up, because they're giving a 2-point lead to Tim Ryan. 2! They said Biden was going to take that state by 7. He got his butt kicked. That's a 15-point miss, ladies and gentlemen. My God. I mean, this is, Robert, it gets a little bit, what's more frustrating than them? It's the people who believe it. It's like year after year, they're constantly believing the same thing over and over again. It's like they're falling for it. Fewer people are every year. But I'm saying there's still voices, even on the right, they believe it. They wholly believe it. And it makes for poor decisions. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that really was what it comes down to.
Yeah, but poor tactical and strategic decisions. People like Mastriano could be in better position if they weren't doing what they were doing. So you look at the fundamentals is what really matters. Well, what's the party lean of this of a state given its current political environment in the Trump era? So some of these partisan leans, they're still looking at pre-Trump. I don't know why they do that. I mean, it's not Trump clearly defined the environment. The Trump margin was the most predictive margin in these races since Trump in 2016. Definitely 2018, again 2020. It's going to be the same in 2022 down ballot. I think Walker is in excellent position. I think Walker is going to win. I think Walker is going to prevail. Again, it's the lean isn't
4 weeks a long time, my friend.
Oh yeah, no doubt. You look at it. I mean, you're talking about basically, and Warnock's lead again is small in a lot of these polls. Georgia's a 4-point Republican lean state. Warnock has never had any special appeal. He barely snuck in getting the runoff in good environment with the Republicans doing everything they could to kill their own base turnout. And he still barely got in. So, and he was running against someone who was openly and notoriously corrupt. Given her, I'm still going to trade stocks while I'm in the Senate routine. And then there was, we're not going to send checks out to people and all that. I mean, every political mistake you could make, and yet Warnock still barely won. And so it's not going to happen against Walker. You look at Walker already had good inroads into some Democratic constituencies early on in the polling data. That's all he really needed. The polling in Georgia has also been notoriously off. So these are states I look at the fundamentals and what's unique about the Georgia race. I mean, the other thing is all this personal appeal stuff. There's been very few examples of that. You could look at Manchin in West Virginia. You could look at Tester in Montana. That was about the only 2 examples because, I mean, as you mentioned in Florida, it's supposed to be all this personal appeal. That didn't turn out the case. And that's why Rick Scott's in the Senate now. That's right. The Democrat, Bill Nelson and this long, not really. Unless you have a really distinct, like Sinema, if she was running in Arizona, probably above average chance because she's carved herself out as an independent. Kelly hasn't. So you dig into you look at, for example, Ohio. if Tim Ryan was going to win, then his district wouldn't have had more people turn out for Republicans than him in the primary.
Robert, the fundamentals suggest he's going to get his ass kicked in his own backyard. It's not. Are you kidding me? Which, by the way, I was talking to a Bloomberg reporter in Dallas a couple weeks ago. He's like, he's from there, and he's like chuckling at these polls himself. He's like, look, I got to write it up, But he's like, there's, help me out here. What the hell are they doing? Because I'm from this area, and there is no way he's going to beat J.D. Vance. And say, like, once you go from the House to the Senate, goodwill is gone. So you're now running as a national race statewide, and you're really aligned with your party at this point. Jim Renacci, however you say it, I'm Italian, but you can pronounce it both ways. I don't know how he says it, but he was not a good candidate. We know he's not a good candidate, and if Josh Mandel never left that race, Sherrod Brown would have went down too. Go look at the polls in 2018. He only wound up winning by a modest margin. USA Today had him ahead by 23 points at one point. I want to tell people what they did in Virginia in 2021. Larry Sabato's crystal ball, inside elections in the Cook Politico report. You ready? At least inside elections with Nathan Gonzalez. On October 12th, they all had a Democratic race. I'm talking about Terry McAuliffe versus Glenn Youngkin. By October 19th, you think it changed? Nope. By October 26th? Nope. That's when inside elections did move it from leans Democrat to tilt Democrat. Everybody else, do you know when they finally moved that race? Two of them moved it to a toss-up again. Still favoring slightly Terry McAuliffe. All right. And Larry Sabato's crystal ball moved it to lean Republican. Do you want to know what day? The day before Election Day.
Exactly.
The day before
they weren't inaccurate the whole time.
Day. Yeah, so
Which
they could pretend like they had it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a
two
sign
did
of
not
the
move it.
political bias is shaping it. You have bad polls. You're ignoring relevant, pertinent data that has been predictive in the past, like voter registration, like party primary participation, right? Like self-described enthusiasm gaps. All of these things have stayed steady throughout the summer and throughout the fall. They're all trending Republican. You look at who's undecided, trending heavily. Years ago, when I bet on the Labour Party to overperform in the UK, it was because the undecided voter was clearly a Labour-leaning voter. It was a pro-Brexit, but traditional Labour working-class woman voter. And because Labour made the smart decision in that election, which they later reversed, to say we're not going to call for a new election in on Brexit, they were going to be able to win those voters back. You look at the fundamentals, Biden is way underwater. You look at recent trends since our nationalized elections in 2006.
According to them, he's surging. He's surging to 43, Robert.
All of these predictions are just nuts. So they're ignoring, like, what has changed in the fundamentals that helped the Democrats in the last month? And the answer is nothing. There's no. It's gotten worse. The economy is getting worse. Inflation is not being tamed. The stock market showing signs of risk. The housing market showing signs of risk. People are stocking up on credit cards to counterbalance the effect of the inflationary cost of living impact. The Ukrainian conflict is not getting any better from a political domestic perspective. You got even the Washington Post talking about whether and when Hunter Biden gets indicted. This is not good.
Looks like he is going to be indicted. It does. But I got to tell you, Sean Hannity, dude, he's screwed up. All right. Playing that audio. I'm not going to do it because I'm not an idiot. Playing that audio of Joe Biden, anyone who's ever had family who's dealt with addiction, everybody knows this issue is near and dear to my heart. Yeah. You're an enabler. So what? Everybody enables when they're dealing with the family member who was in the throes of addiction. And, he basically, Sean Hannity took a cheap shot last night, and all it did was make him look sympathetic. He did that, a week after Tucker Carlson ran a very credible and very, very damning report with Tony Bobulinski. Basically, Robert, you're a lawyer. I got to bring this up, and then I'll discuss what I have on the screen here. But I'm just trying to remind people of what they do. I'm trying to give them, because we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, guys, without calling ourselves insane. And I'm telling you, that's what you're doing here. You're allowing them to make you an insane person because you believe this nonsense. But that was fraud,
pieces.
Robert. That's a crime, right? What Tony Bobulinski suggested is illegal.
Oh,
Robert. It diverted $10 million.
It's a barely disguised reality at this point. But all of these efforts in the early, up until probably a few days before Election Day, are designed to influence who volunteers, who donates, who's enthusiastic. And so it's the media trying to give a tilt to the Democratic candidates by promoting fake polls, by promoting fake storylines, by promoting fake scandals, to try to impact donors, impact volunteers, impact others. Now, from a betting perspective, it's a godsend because because there's still people who bet money listening to the Nate Silvers of the world. I was going to put out a challenge to Decision Desk and say, I'll take those odds you're putting up on some of these Senate. And what? None of them will. I guarantee Nate Silver doesn't bet on any of his idiotic propositions. The Decision Desk doesn't. Crystal Ball doesn't. And none of these people are willing to bet because I've challenged them for multiple election cycles and said, hey,
I've seen it.
Right, let's bet.
Yep.
And a few people last cycle in 2020 took the bet. And they won money and 3 lost money. So they because they're actually going to bet that Biden was going to win by 8. Remember, that was the 538's median predicted margin.
That was yes, it was
8 points. So you look at just Pennsylvania is a lean Republican state. Wisconsin's a lean Republican state. Ohio's a major lean Republican state. Arizona's a lean Republican state. North Carolina's a lean Republican state. Florida's a lean Republican state. Georgia's a lean Republican state. And they even admit it's a lean Republican national environment. That's all you really need to know that these are going to be big Republican wins up and down the ballot.
Their own laws, whatever you want to call it, their own model laws don't make sense. If incumbency was such a big deal and that's their justification for Mark Kelly in Arizona, then why is Florida closer, Robert? Why are they even entertaining it? They don't make any sense. And they ignored this. Here's what I'm trying to show people. Jimmy Carter won the presidency in 1977. The House was Democratic. The Senate was Democratic. A Republican won the next year in Virginia. You can see it really the House. There are two things that really are highly predictive, and that is who controls the House and won the presidency. If they're, if they are, together, then it's almost a shoo-in. You're going to lose that governorship. But really, what it shows, especially in first-term incumbent elections, special elections, the opposite party wins the presidency. Ronald Reagan won it in 1981. Then Charles Robb won it by 7 points. After Reagan was reelected, Gerald Biles won it by 10. There's been one example of when the opposite party did not win it. But again, we have seen it happen with second terms before, and that was Barack Obama, Terry McAuliffe. Oh, no, that's right. Never mind. Barack Obama was Bob McDaniel. And then after Obama won his reelection, Terry McAuliffe was able to win it. But you know what people would say is who controlled the Congress? Look at who controlled Congress. So that's in this particular example. There was no chance, none, that Terry McAuliffe was going to win. 0. If you were only using this behavior as a predictive variable in a model. All right, let's call this the House and Congress control model. Who's going to win the governorship in the state of Virginia in 2021? Despite what the polls say, and I'll tell you what they said. USA Today, McAuliffe. Where else? I lost him before, but USA Today was McAuliffe. Washington Post, McAuliffe. Christopher Newport University, McAuliffe. Suffolk University, McAuliffe. All right, so who put out Youngkin Plus polls? Fox, which was shilling for who they thought was an establishment. So they put out a Youngkin plus 8, which was an outlier. I mean, it was just crazy. Youngkin was never going to win by 8 points. Outside of that, it was Robert Cahaly at Trafalgar and me. That's it.
Yeah.
And
it's these fundamentals, I mean, especially.
And maybe insider advantage.
They've accelerated all the historical trends, all the current economic data, all the job presidential approval data, all the party primary participation rate, all the extreme enthusiasm data, all the voter registration data. It's all pointing in one direction. Yep. It's all. There's no second guessing, no doubting, no questioning, no ifs, ands, or buts. And especially when you look at post-2004, it's been heavy swings against the incumbent party. 2006, again in 2010, again in 2018. So the idea, and again, and from a state level, for the Senate, you're looking at where are these elections? Because that's how the Senate can go wacky. It's how it went wacky in my favor on paper in 2018, is because of where the key races were. And here, all of the key races are Republican-leaning states. And that's where, again, if the Nevada's a Republican-lean state. You know, it wasn't true back just a little ways ago, but under Trump, it's a Republican-lean state. And so when you see national environment, even they're admitting the national environment, all these same polling watchers, all the rest, they admit the national environment is pro-Republican, that that's a Republican +1, 2, you know, depending on where they're at. All admit it's really a plus.
Their forecasts don't make sense.
Exactly. It doesn't.
And I think we all are now. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, their forecasts are designed to try to influence the election. They're not trying to capture what's happening in the election.
Yeah, I mean, Robert, if we had the money to poll more, I really believe that the combined voices of a few of us would probably straighten this industry out a little bit better. I actually just went back and looked, and in fact, that is all who had Youngkin ahead. Robert, myself, and Matt from Insider Advantage. That's it. I'm, you know, well, stay tuned. I'm not on Real Clear Politics yet. I would tell you to stay tuned for that. All right. But that's it. Everybody else was McAuliffe. Yes, some of them got closer. Monmouth, they heard it at the end to a tie, because by that time, there were those of us out there who were already saying it's either tied or Youngkin is about to take a lead. And we had been tracking it and polling it. Meanwhile, he didn't take any lead until October 27th.
and they never had
October 27th.
In New Jersey, they never had it close at all.
No.
And there, the media, their effective media lies about what was happening in New Jersey worked, because it did create a disparity of attention and involvement and engagement. But what was interesting is New Jersey swung more to the Republican
16.
side than Virginia did, using Trump as the baseline. And you look at why, it's working class ethnic South New Jersey.
That's right.
And the other problem is their big leads. I think in some of the big metropolitan areas, they'll maintain the leads. But in some of the more Midwestern and Southern areas, the woke stuff is hurting them badly. And it's going to hurt them. It's already hurting them in lots of school board elections, but it's hurting them in the suburbs where they made inroads. With and by suburbs, I mean a very distinct group of suburbs, the upper middle class suburbs. They're not keeping the margins they once had there, so that they were able to gain against Trump. And then you look at where the House races are competitive. In 2018, a lot of the House races that were competitive were disproportionately upscale districts, above average college educated vote. In 2022, a lot of them are working class districts. And so you look at those dynamics, everything points to them. And then look at the national electoral environment. I mean, what has gone right for the Democrats in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or month or frankly, 2 years, but definitely in the last several months, it's just been getting worse. There's bad economic news every single day. And here's another example. You know, I always tell people, look to where Democrats are actually spending money. Look at where Democrats are actually going.
Right.
Don't look
I was
going
to do that next.
They're incompetent.
Yep.
And Mitch
They're
McConnell
stupid.
But you look at where why is Kamala Harris campaigning in Washington for Patty Murray if Democrats are about to crush the Senate elections?
And I know, because somebody who was doing a report in Politico, I know that Democrats are worried in New Hampshire. They think they have a lead, but they don't trust the lead.
These are states they should not be worried about with Democratic incumbents.
That's right, Robert. That's right. And let me tell you what, they pulled $2 million from what's her name in the Arizona Attorney General race, Mays. Hamadeh, if my polling is so off, then why did Democrats abandon Mays in this race? Because my polling's not off, and because my polling is exactly what their polling shows, which is that she has lost. She has lost already. Abraham Hamadeh has beaten her already, and the reason is, look at some of these groups, Robert. We know the high school less. We know the working class margin, right? Look at 4 year. undergrad. That's when they said this race is over. I mean, you can't be tied with 4-year undergrads and win a race in the state of Arizona as a Democrat. You can't do it. You're going to get murdered. In Maricopa, he's got a freaking 5-point lead on her, dude. 5-point lead. And by the way, to go back to Masters, that's Lake Hobbs, sorry. Masters took a 1-point lead in Maricopa by the time we were done polling. All right, that was a big deal. When we first started polling, Laura and I were looking at it. We were looking at maybe like a 3-point deficit in Maricopa. And I'm like, that's hard to make up. That's hard for Masters to make up. In the end, he started to consolidate some of that. Some of it was just money being spent. There was also the comment, because it was coming from outside of Scottsdale. That's where his support, it was really racing from. They were coming from Hispanic neighborhoods. I think the Rodrigo comment got through because you had the Arizona Central not only cover it, they covered it to try to cover it up. You know, Mark Kelly apologizes for racially insensitive comment. The Arizona Republic, also no fan of Republicans, they covered it. Fox Phoenix covered it. People saw this, and people were texting back. If they were contacted through P2P, they would do the survey and then like add Mark Kelly's a racist. Mark Kelly is a privileged white elitist. Mark Kelly is sometimes nasty stuff, a short little toadstool of a man. They were mocking him very rarely, and you'll get it. But people, there were some liberals who were like, Blake Masters wants to take away my right to rip out my fallopian tubes with a baby in it. With a baby in my womb. Like there was some of that, because you're going to get that on both sides. But you can see that there was just more heat on one than there was on the other. And you look at that margin with Hispanics, and I'm not wrong there, Robert. Look at the NBC Telemundo poll. They're showing two things. One, 4 years ago, conservative, or let's call it 6 years ago now, because it started under Trump, as they even admitted. 6 years ago, conservative Hispanics still preferred Democrats on the generic ballot and on, generically. They still preferred to vote Democrat. That has swung 58 points. So the fact is more Hispanics are identifying as conservative. And if their polling is correct, then nothing that I found should shock anybody. That's just simply them changing their vote preference because they're not woke. They're not nuts. They can't deal with inflation. No offense, nuts. I'm using the word nuts.
Well,
one guy in Nevada told me, I don't have time to learn all your new damn pronouns. I just learned English. I can't learn new pronouns for you. That's what he said. I was dying. I was laughing hysterically. He's like, I have to deal with inflation. I don't have time to worry about this, okay? I'm voting for Adam Laxalt. I mean, and these people are not Republican voters, And by the way, one last thing real quick. You're talking about party identification, not just registration. Look at Gallup is now what in party ID? It swung some ridiculous margin. 7% of registered Democrats, it's just under 7% in Arizona said they were independent. That's a bad sign, man. When you see that,
no doubt about it. Well, even Harry Enton at CNN used to be associated with 538. Very liberal Democratic. I mean, CNN said the generic ballot in 2018 was going to go 17 points for Democrats. That was their last big poll.
Right.
They had double, all that. Even Harry Enton pointed
Gillum
out.
plus 12, baby. Gillum plus 12.
In Florida. But Henton put out an article for CNN saying that if you looked at the number one issue and which party had a lead on that issue, that it had been a very good predictor of what was going to happen. And he pointed out Republicans have the biggest lead on the number one issue in like 20 years that any party has had. So, I mean, So his own analysis, that's why there's a reason they're not talking about fundamentals. They're not talking about inflation. They're not talking about cost of living. They're not talking about political scandals. They're not talking about crime. They're not talking about immigration. They're not talking about how people really feel about spending a bunch of money on foreign wars. They're not talking about Biden's scandals. They're trying to cover up Uncle Festerman's inability to put two words together. They're trying to cover up, the Warnock wanting to run over women when he gets the chance. They're trying to cover up the fact that, try to cover up what Mark Kelly was saying in his honest expose. Didn't help Mark Kelly that he looked like he was 5'2" up there against Blake Masters, because Blake Masters really tall.
Oh, it was so bad optically from a short guy's perspective. For Robert knows, for anyone who's met the People's Pundit, I'm not exactly a towering stature of a man. Even I can admit that looked terrible. It just does, Robert.
I mean, Trump obsesses over making sure height's done in a certain way, and that nobody, So and then those images stick, and the fact that they ultimately both, did the debate, both Ryan in Ohio with Vance and then Kelly with. And remember, Kelly, folks, barely beat Martha McSally in 2018.
Barely.
So
barely.
So you look
won
at that
by
dynamic.
Less than half the predicted margin. By the way, he won by less than half his predicted margin.
Absolutely. And so you look at that, and it's like, hold on a second. How much? How much is there really going to? Oh, I'm sorry. Sinema beat him in 2018, and then Kelly beat him in 2020. Both times very close. But even in 2018, it was close. Remember that interesting late reporting that took place in Arizona in 2018? Why isn't a big Republican electoral environment where all the issues favor Republicans, where all the historical trends favor Republicans, where all the evident, actual participation issues, registration, affiliation, party primary voting, etc., all of it favors Republican, in states that already lean Republican, are suddenly going to vote Democrat because the media has some fake polls to tell you that? So that's what people should, look at the fundamentals. Arizona's a good place to invest. Ohio's a lock. We probably shouldn't spend as much money as we are spending there, frankly. If there's limits on how much money is available, probably can put it into other states. J.D. Vance is just fine. All of these,
outperforming the Cincinnati Burbs, and he's going to beat him in his own backyard. Mark my words. Robert, if I got to pull this state, if I got to waste 5 figures to pull the state, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah, there's nothing to bring those voters back in Ohio. Same in Wisconsin. Again, on core issues, they haven't done anything to reach the voters they lost since 2016, and the Democrats, and they've lost voters they made inroads with since 2016.
4-year
continue
degrees.
to lose with the voters that they made. Yeah, and they continue to lose with Latinos, as we've seen in Texas, as we've seen in Arizona, as we're seeing in Nevada. We're seeing in Florida. Florida really should be a hyper-competitive state. The fact that nobody seriously thinks it's a competitive state this cycle is a sign of how deeply in trouble Democratic Party is.
And it's a sign on how some nuts these forecasters are. Because if they're even entertaining, listen, folks out there, they're entertaining Florida. That should tell you everything you need to know about the state of mind that they're in and how out in left field they are. Robert, you're just, to Harry Enton's point, which I can't believe I'm going to say this, but to Harry Enton's point, the one midterm, and I keep telling people, don't compare first and second term midterms. Second terms are bad enough, but first are special. And there's only one example in modern history where you can see and it was Republicans. It was George W. Bush. He had a 68% approval rating, something like that. But it wasn't just that. It's not even approval. It's what Harry Enton was actually even talking about. They led on the most important issue, which was foreign policy and national security. National security, really, that people were afraid. For those who aren't old enough to remember, there was constant threat. There was anthrax after 9/11. There was threats of there's a dirty nuke that's going to go off in New York City at any minute now. This is what we've lived under. Republicans were trusted overwhelmingly, more than Democrats, to keep people safe. That is the reason, along with George W. Bush's approval, that they bucked the historical trend. It was an ahistoric event. Here, abortion is in some areas, it has increased, but it's only because it's being driven by their own voters. I got to tell you, and I don't mean to blow up, but look, in a certain battleground, and because I got to bring this up to you because you'll understand it. In a certain battleground district in Western Michigan, where I was working, but now I no longer work because that's how Kevin McCarthy survives. He bribes clients to get rid of the team that got them across the finish line to the general election, because they won't give them money unless they give their friends these vendor contracts, including their favorite pollsters. And by the way, The Hill just came out with a poll, for crying out loud, in Georgia. They have Warnock up by 2. That's it. That is all. So Trafalgar's got Warnock up by 1. The Hill's got him up by 2. Bear with me, because this is going to matter. I'm going to blow up a pollster, at least one today, and accuse them of doing something straight dirty for the establishment, because I believe they're doing this. This is a district in Western Michigan, Robert. It includes a city that rhymes with Scran Bapids. Okay. All right. So this is what they did to give the Democrat a slight lead in their internal polling, to try to get him to stay on a moderate message, as opposed to what won him the damn primary in the first place. And I said, go on offense on abortion. Do not do what they're telling you to do, which is run and hide like a bunch of babies. Okay. 20% graduate degree. 20%, Robert. 40% 4-year college degree. You want to know how many in this pull of a high school diploma or less? 10%. Okay? All right. Here's the general election, X out of 4. 0 out of 4, meaning, folks, they haven't voted in a single general election over the last 4 cycles. They're going to be 3% of the electorate. 1 out of 4, meaning they voted in 1 general election out of the last 4. They voted in 20%. And they will be 20% of the electorate. Okay, Robert, I know you'll get a kick. I got to read this to you, because I knew you'll get a kick of this. You ready? 2 out of 4, they're 15%. 3 out of 4 is roughly 20%. And 4 out of 4 will only be about 40, a little over 40% of the electorate. Robert, that doesn't even happen in general elections, my friend. Are you kidding me? A midterm, there's going to be about a quarter who either this is their first general election or their second general election. About a quarter of the electorate will include new voters. This is a freaking joke. 20% in Western Virginia has a postgrad degree. This is what I'm talking about, my friend. This is why Republicans are dumb, but they're self-sabotaging, because I'm talking about those public polls in Georgia. The internal poll for Mitch McConnell showed Walker down by double digits, and it was and Trump's hired this guy before. It's Fabrizio. He gave Blake Masters a poll not long ago that showed Blake Masters really close. Somebody else pays the bills. Masters is down by 10. All right. Mitch McConnell needs an excuse to pull funds away from a race, and he gives them a ridiculous result that nobody else is. Even media favored polls are still showing Walker within the margin of error with 4 weeks to go. You can bounce back in 4 weeks, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, from a story like what he is taught, what happened to him. I mean, people will eventually, especially that working class Robert and I are talking about, they'll say, all right, I'm paying attention now. Let me see who I'm going to vote for. I'm not going to vote for Warnock.
And the idea that any independent blue collar voter is going to care about some of the bogus scandals they're trying to wrap around Walker, especially when Warnock has more scandals, is just not going to be. I mean, Warnock's busy, getting special payments from people who want to evict people for being $20 late on their rent. During
for
COVID,
people who don't know, wasn't that illegal, man? Didn't they pass a law that they weren't allowed to do that? But then they waited until that expired and basically retroactively evicted the SOB. Folks, for those who don't know what we're talking about, Warnock gets from this church, it's the worst Christianity. He gets a $7,000 plus housing allowance from this church, who also pays a salary to him. And they own largely minority low-income housing, apartments for minorities, low-income minorities. They evicted one tenant, owed $22.80 or something like that. They evicted them during COVID because of that. There's another one too. They're being sued for it now because, right? I mean, they're going to win that, right? I mean, I thought you weren't allowed to run eviction proceedings during that time period. Yet the court dates, I read the court reports. I mean, it's very clearly during the period where the federal government was supposed to have put a moratorium, even though there was, I don't know, the Supreme Court. Did they ever weigh in on that, Robert? A lot of people argued that was unconstitutional, but
Yeah, and,
Well, I don't
and
know what
ultimately it was
happened.
found. Yeah, ultimately it was found to be. But like you,
Was,
for the
right?
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
and the other thing is the assumption that's out
Real
there
Christian of
that
them.
your ordinary voter follows any of these stories in much detail. The voter that's
Right.
undecided is just not the case. That you know that
No.
they are late to the party. What's going to matter to them is the big issues, the national electoral environment, and that's where Republicans are very well situated. Someone asked about Virginia 10. I think any seat that Biden did not
2,
win
10,
by
7.
6 points or more is a likely Republican seat. That's my takeaway. I think when Trendy ran the numbers, he just said if it moved, if it was about a 6-7 point
52.
move, yeah,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
then it was going to be there low. So unless Biden and you look at the seats, basically it comes out. I agree with Patrick Basham. I think I'm still sticking with 245, 250 for how many Republican House seats in places like Virginia 7, places like Virginia 10, some of these other places that Democrats have squeaked by in the past are seats that are going to fall. And we'll know early on election night. If a place like Rhode Island 2 is even competitive, if some of these Virginia seats, the data's coming in good, then you know it's going to be a sweep across the country.
Yeah. That's you'll see some of this pretty early. In Indiana, we get some numbers pretty early, and there are some like baseline districts that we look at. And by the way, Kentucky's another one. That's how we knew in 18 Republicans were in some deep, trouble in 18. First, we got votes in this Kentucky 5, and it was like, oh, but again, this is something we told. Oh, that's another thing I wondered, because people always say, well, what about the Senate, Rich? Republicans bucked the trend in the Senate. It was not the trend in the Senate. The map for the Republican Party, like Robert had said about an hour ago, was favorable to the Republican Party in the modern era, where there is really no ticket splitting
And
between,
Republicans
there.
it's still underperformed in the Senate. I mean, the fact
They
that
did.
Florida went
They should have taken
Republican
Montana.
was a sign that Florida was moving in 2018. But
Yeah.
they held on to West Virginia only because of Manchin and because of the 2018 electoral environment. Same with Tester in Montana. But none of these Democrats are like Manchin or Tester. They're more like what's her name from Missouri and what's his name from Indiana. They're people that you have to look up their name to remember who they were. That they're not memorable, not uniquely distinctive. And again, Manchin almost went down in West Virginia. Tester almost went down in Montana. And
2
Democrats
points.
still performed well, but it was just these states leaned so Republican that's ultimately what mattered in a national electoral environment in the Senate level. And what you have in 2022 is just a very favorable Republican map. And this was acknowledged 6 months ago. It's just all these so-called experts are pretending they didn't remember that now. And it's extraordinary to watch. But all of these
So
states
dishonest, Robert. So dishonest. It is. It's like, I just when I think they can't disappoint me anymore. I'm serious. Just when I'm seeing like have some friggin', I don't even know what to be a professional. Be a professional. That's really what it comes down to. You are totally for sale. And either you're for sale or because it can be both. You have no courage to push back against the hive mind, the groupthink, right? That's really a lot of this comes down to that they start to, they hive mind each other, man. And pollsters, they're the worst. I watched them do it. Weeks ago. And that's why I asked you about Pennsylvania. Weeks ago, everybody pretty much agreed. Damn, Oz is probably in the lead right now. Yet nobody wants to be the first one to drop an Oz +1. Nobody wants to do it. And that I really think if we were there doing it, Robert, and we were, constantly in the field in these states, maybe look, we pushed. I really do think Wisconsin, Nevada, we pushed them to do the right thing. The same thing in Virginia. We pushed them in Virginia in 2021. I just and in Georgia, I can see Warnock, having some benefits off of a response bias, because folks, when scandals break, there are response biases, meaning Walker's voters don't want to talk right now.
The numbers don't change. People stop answering the calls. This is what happened with Trump after the Access Hollywood tape.
Yes.
And I told Sean Trendy, I told others, now is when I'm going to double down on Trump, because they've studied this phenomenon many times. And in fact, when you see these sudden radical shifts in polling after a scandal breaks, it's not because people have changed their mind. It's because people at that moment aren't excited to answer a poll about the race. That's all it is. And that's why you can, that's why if the Walker piece was a successful hit piece, Warnock should have been up by 7, 8, 9. That's what should have happened. You should have seen him back over 50% as an incumbent. You should have seen undecideds rallying to him. None of those things happen. I mean, they know that they're in trouble in these races. And again, you look at a place like Washington, really leans in the current environment, 6 points more Democratic than the country, and yet Patty Murray's in trouble. The Democrats aren't spending money there and sending Kamala Harris there for the benefit of their health. They got too many other competitive races to worry about Washington, unless their internal data say they have trouble in Washington. And if they have trouble in Washington, they got big trouble in places like Ohio, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and so forth.
Yeah, I think, what do you make of and I know we're at 9 o'clock now. What do you make of the Dixon? It's one state we have not polled is Michigan at all, because my general philosophy has been if we're at limitations with how much we can poll, I'd rather poll several states multiple times so we can have final numbers, as opposed to adding a bunch of states and then being judged on a poll we did 2 months before the election, because that's what they love to do to people who aren't in the high line. They won't judge Fox News for a poll they did 2 months before an election. They won't judge, but people like me, they do. So I didn't want to add Michigan. What do you think about where Tudor Dixon is with Gretchen Whitmer? She generally had one of the harder people to beat, Robert. What do you think about that?
I mean, my view is either Michigan or Pennsylvania will vote Republican for governor. And that it would be my odds. I would put both of them at 50-50. It's governor's races, so governor's races don't always follow the national electoral environment, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, the institutional party apparatus has not supported either one of them in either state.
That's right.
Number three, they're relatively unknown figures. And number four, they're running against politically protected incumbents. So that's what I got to take a little bit deeper dive into to see. I would love to see both of those Democratic governors lose because they were awful during the pandemic. But Mastriano probably right now a little bit better chance than Dixon. But I think both of those will be much more competitive than people are currently forecasting in some of the media apparatus.
I think Mastriano's voters are the exact kind of voters that you're going to get screwed from. There are people who will take a poll and say, yes, I'm going to vote for Mehmet Oz, but I don't know who I'm going to vote for, or I might vote for Shapiro. And that's just a load of crap because Mastriano is so much more controversial, let's be honest. And they're just like kind of afraid to do it. Although I will say, I mean, Robert, when we were polling that race, Mastriano we had running at that time stronger because he had base consolidation. But Mehmet Oz was doing like 2016 Trump level numbers in Allegheny. You know, like he was at like 44% in Allegheny or 43, something like that. And it was real. And you could see it was real. There were some wards, for people who don't know this too, Fetterman is not well liked by the Black community. Never was. And there are some wards in Philadelphia who, were definitely, going to vote for Oz, but not Mastriano. Oz was still running behind him at that time because he was not doing as well in central Pennsylvania. He was not doing as well in some areas out west that Mastriano was killing it in. So I think that, media polling, the way it's done, man, that would disproportionately hurt Mastriano. It's like those who said, maybe some of the Republican senators would hold on, but Trump was going to go down. Right? And then in the end, what really happened is that Trump wound up dragging some of them over the finish line. But it was Trump's voters who were more susceptible to these biases in polling. So, we'll see. But what are your final thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, so I'm going to put up all the latest recommended political picks for the betting market. So there's some more places opening up betting markets at sportspicks.locals.com probably tomorrow. Right now, my lean is still, I'm sticking with 245 or more Republicans in the House, 52 or more Republicans in the Senate, and 30 or more Republican governors. And we might see surprises. Maybe on the governor's side, it might be Oregon. On the Senate side, it might be Washington or New Hampshire. On the House
Oregon,
side, it might be a place like Rhode Island too. So, but I think on election night, I've seen nothing whatsoever in the fundamentals that I look at to suggest it's going to be anything but a big Republican night. And it'd be great if it was, we get the governorships of Pennsylvania and Michigan. But at least Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia are going to have much better Georgia's the same governor, but with a different mindset this time. For 2024, those were the states that Trump and others needed to have Republican governors in. And Kari Lake's a lot better than her predecessor. I think Evers is DOA in Wisconsin, and
I think he's done.
And we have a better version of what we had in Georgia. So I think you combine those factors, and it's going to be a big Republican win at this point. I don't see anything changing it. I don't know if there's an October surprise they can pull out of the hat. They're kind of running late on that. The clock is ticking. I don't think that they've taken out their scandal hit pieces on different people, and they haven't really gone anywhere. Not the kind of numbers you need to really shift in the direction of an election. So I think the key is ignore all these fake analysts, fake pollsters, fake media people who are actually sometimes deliberately, sometimes because they have extraordinary lack of self-reflection and competent capabilities. But at this point, when this is election cycle number 4 or 5 or 6, where they're pitching the same lie, just ignore all of it. Don't use them for any proxy about money decisions, donation decisions, volunteer decisions, or the rest. And it'll be great to see populist candidates like Blake Masters and J.D. Vance get into the United States Senate. I think they will be, despite all of Mitch McConnell's efforts, come next January.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. But I'm very much in line with that. I'll just add to that. We got to redo our Senate forecast. It's time. I was waiting for my own polling in Arizona. At this point, I think Masters is going to catch Kelly. I do. I mean, it's just who is undecided. Is I watched it in real time, Robert. I watched it go from a 3-point difference down to almost nothing. I watched Kari Lake outperform him, not as much as some of the media polls, but then down to basically like 3.5, 4 points. It closed considerably. That's a run, man. That's a run. And this idea, Mark Victor is going to take 15 to 20% from Blake Masters is ludicrous. And not for nothing, but the pollster didn't do a fantastic job in the primary. And he didn't do a great job in the last 2 election cycles in his own state. So not that it's not that I'm disrespecting. I'm not. It's just a fact. It's a fact. We thought Kari Lake was going to win by a bigger amount too, but we didn't go that far. It looked close, but in the end, it looked close to what we saw, in his polling, just that we were mixed mode. One of our modes looked just like that, but mixing up the modes gives you different groups of people, and then, we put it together and we had less of a lead for her, although it was a sizable one. But I'm telling you, man, I think Masters has all the votes left on the table. They just got to get them to vote and watch for, places like Arizona. Robert and I told people in 2020, do not expect votes to be reported the way you had seen them in 16 or even 18 for that matter. Voting behavior now is getting to be crazy in Arizona. The margin this time, Robert, first, we're going to have a big election day vote in Arizona, which we almost never have. It's always 12, 15%. The rest is mail-in ballot. Those days are over. This will be a big election day vote because it will be very Trumpy, very MAGA. And, you're going to have to wait a couple of days. But Kari Lake, for instance, and Blake Masters, they're winning over 70% of the election day vote. So you're just going to have to wait for those to come in. And the 2,000 mules voters, as Charlie Kirk called them, that 10%, the Republican Party in Arizona is telling them not to do it, but they're still doing it. Look, I'm going to take my mail-in ballot and I'm going to bring it in on election day. Those votes take days to count, but they're overwhelmingly Republican, overwhelmingly. So be prepared for all of the people that Robert and I have been talking about tonight. Be prepared for them on election night to do what they did against Kari Lake with Karen Taylor Robson. The lead's too large. The early vote is too big. She has no chance to catch up. That was never true. And it's going to happen again. And it's going to be pretty significant. You're just going to have to wait. I wish it wasn't like that. But states not everywhere is Florida, unfortunately. Right, Robert? If everyone was Florida, we still could do this in a night. But they're not.
No doubt.
So
like every place
with that in mind. Yeah, or anywhere in any other developed freaking country, right?
By the way, little tandem, Bolsonaro is drawn close to even with Lulu, even in the polls that have historically undervalued him. So Bolsonaro is a live dog in Brazil.
he is closing. I saw that, man. Now Lula is not anywhere near, well, he's close, but not, the 50+% polling he was doing before in a head-to-head. Those days are gone. The last one I just saw was 58-46. And by how much they have historically understated Bolsonaro's support, that's panic time for Lula. That's panic time, man. If past is prologue. With that in mind, brother, we'll see you next Tuesday. 7:30, right? Eastern Standard Time,
Absolutely.
folks.
That's right.
Thanks for joining everybody. The odds. See you then.
The lights that shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway, restless nights, coffee houses, clubs and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you, working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning.